You are in the business exchange. We are really proud, professionally excited by the access that the business exchange grants us by having the most consummate professionals that can give us insight into where our community is on the business transactions for these United States and the world. Today we have great guests. Hello to you. My staff just said that. But nothing else could make me prouder than the fact that a CEO of one of the oldest Black banks in this country, First Independence in Detroit, has paused for a moment to give us all access into the inner workings of the financial system and insight to where we all should be. I'd like to welcome to the Business Exchange CEO and Chairman, Kenneth Kelly. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you, Brother Monson. It's great to be here. We're doing as well as can be expected under the challenges that we're facing, as you can imagine. I think all of us have a gut sickness in our stomach in terms of what we've seen. And so we're doing as well as we can. You know, we have the resilience to kind of continue to fight and push through this. And I'm so happy to have you to provide us with a voice to be able to share what is important to African Americans in this country.
You know, I know that with change, there's struggle. And I think that there wasn't a moment 16 days ago when we all began to see the uprising, not protest, everybody, right. The uprising for the atrocity that has continued for 400 years,
right?
Both physical, emotional, and economic. So we're at a turning point. I like it. It is a great day for us, and we cannot lose this moment, but we must have, and you know my favorite three initials, some KPIs. And this is key performance indicators, because I don't want our community not to keep an eye on those priorities they'll get from this lunch and learn, because the idea is to take away something once you've been there. So I'm encouraging everybody who's tuned in to ask questions in the chat, be polite and obviously respectful. But this is a moment, CEO Kelly, that we are going to lean into you, because we need to be able to set some priorities from this business exchange lunch and learn that will allow us to go out and teach others some economic priorities and have some economic and banking insights that we don't have nor share with each other each and every day.
Well, we're glad to participate, and I have a couple of things here that will sound macro level, Lonson, but the intent is if we don't start talking about these, we can't build the business case for equity in this country. We have spent a lot of time talking about, well, there's disparities, and sometimes that is good to create the initial awareness. But if you want to begin to have people to take action, you really need some KPIs that say, okay, what are we going to do that moves the needle on this item? And so one of the items that I would just tell you that probably affects a lot of your audience is this whole student debt issue. You know, it disproportionately impacts African Americans, period. And a lot of that has to do with what? The income gap, which has to do with the net worth, which has to do with home ownership, because you didn't have equity to put towards your education. So what I'm in the process of developing is really going to be what's going to be a circle of life, because all of these things are interactive. And if you move one needle, it moves another needle all the way around. But let's just start with student debt. Now, I'm going to give you a live example of what happened to me when I came out of college. Now, I worked with, my parents were blue collar parents, loving, gave me a great home life in a small town, Eufaula, Alabama. I was able to go to college, participated in the Pell Grant process, did work study, did co-op, but I still had some loans when I came out of school. And the reality is, even as an engineer, which had a respectable salary, it took me a year and a half to just get to save up to put my first down payment on my house. Now, I'm telling this story to say that my mom was able to help me with that down payment and, was able to help with that process. Compare myself to one of my peers that I worked with. His grandparents he didn't have any student loans. His grandparents were able to give him his down payment. Now, it can be inferred that he doesn't look like me, and the reality is that's a true statement. But I use that to say, when I look at students today and look at the student loan amount and look at how far it goes out and how it hold us back, not just 5 years, 10 years, sometimes even longer, that is a debt to society we have to pay that we need to overcome. So we need to start watching that, is the point I'm making. So let's put that on the shelf. Student loans, we need to figure out a remedy to lower that, and in particularly lower it as it relates to African Americans. We know the policy has been to remove the Pell Grant. I told you I participated in it, but we need more of that. That's one way our country can demonstrate our value to us, is investing in us in the Pell Grant per se. The second one is, now that I've gotten that education and I've gotten loans, guess what? I've got an income gap. And a lot of times it is done culturally. We know that women make about 68% of white men, in particular African American women. We know that Black men make some percentage, even not as great as Black women, but they make a percentage different that is below white men. Now, the reality is, if you look at, let's just say, the Black African American women, it takes them about 226 days of extra work per year to get to what the equivalent white male. Now, many people will excuse that away. This is data that I didn't create. The Policy Institute created this data. So they've studied this and tried to normalize it. But the point I'm making is, we have to start talking about income inequity. And we need to talk about it in a way that it resonates in this time where we have the attention of corporate America. What are you going to do about this? Again, it may not be solved overnight, because a lot of these things are systemic and have, perpetrated into where we are today over a long period of time. But we need to talk about that. We also, and I think I talked about this last time we were together, the home ownership. So that is the first opportunity for wealth. And so we need to start looking at, why is it that there is home ownership? There are some pathological issues and policies that keep men away from homes and all. We got to throw that out the window. Why is it that we have lower home ownership, period, irrespective of the value of the home, lower home ownership than white America? White America is about 74, 73%. African Americans dipped as low as 40% as of last year. I'm hearing that number is now maybe ticking up a little bit over 40%, but it was the lowest it's been in over 50 years after the measurement started related to the 1968 Fair Housing Act. So those are just three. Let's just start with those and put those on a shelf and say, you know what? You need to have months. And so every time you're talking, not next to that picture behind you that looks so great, but a graph. Are we going up or are we going down? And what are the things we as individuals need to do to purport these topics in such a way that we can start to move forward as an ethnic group? So I'm going to stop there and let you engage me here. So I don't want to talk you to death during this 1 hour, but I wanted to be a little bit more interactive. Your thoughts?
No, I think the conversation is key. I think the activation is more key. I think we've got to list out those individuals, period, banks, mortgage companies that actually can make direct loans, and get people qualified, fintech, so that we have Black fintech companies. I think ownership and growth in how do we grow your bank 1,000%. And how do we, when we're sitting there and I'm listening to many of the young people that I hear talking about the 1.6 billion that was publicized about what they were given, but that's a drop in the bucket when you compare it to what this economy is. So I'm going to ask you to speak to this point, because for me, that's what we're missing. It's like how do we make sure when we're at Nike that we're saying, Nike, we are demanding that you deposit into a Black bank and bank with Black banks. So I'm saying the same for Sephora. If you don't have a Black, run your holdings, run your vendors, and make all your vendors open accounts at Black banks. If you are Visa come with a program that's between rolling out and obviously First Independence, and literally come up with a credit card that will allow people to do their first down payment and have a Christmas savings program all at the same time. So every time they swipe, they save. Every time they swipe, we have a way and a methodology of even swiping yourself so that you're banking. So some people need to know you can swipe and put money in your own account and then pay it off, and it's a part of savings. Feel like you bought something, but really it's a part of your savings. So I think for us, understanding why it's important that we're asking these corporations to be intentional about where they're placing their deposits.
You're spot on. And it's something that we need a higher level of consciousness about. Now, let me get to the point that you said that made me smile about depositing and growing our bank. You can do that at www.firstindependence.com. We can actually open your account remotely so you can be an account holder. And I have a favorite
one
saying.
second. Somebody on my team is going to do that today.
Okay, great.
That's a guarantee. Somebody on my team is going to do that with a business today.
Great.
And I'm going to get 10 other businesses, and they'll let you know when they do it, to open an account today.
That's perfect.
The other thing I will say to my community is we need our African-American influencers. Either they can actually put on there, I've got Black KPIs, or we should start deleting their pages or stop following people who aren't at least having one account at a Black bank. It means we hate ourselves if we're not Black banking with ourselves. They got the same insurance, or up to $100,000, the same insurance. What are we missing?
250,000.
250. I'm back. I'm behind.
That was the old number. It is 250 now. You're spot on. But and to your point, and I have a favorite saying which lays right into what you just said, Monson, which is, I don't need all of your money. I just need some of your money. And it can make a big difference. And so let me put it in scale. I may have talked about this last time we were on. There are $20 trillion in banks in this country. 20 trillion.
Trillion. That's with a T.
That's with a T. I want to be clear about that. The African-American banking sector of the 20 of us right now is about 5 billion. So you know the numbers of African-American buying power of 1.2 trillion or 1.2 billion or 1.6 billion. So it says what you said. I'm not going to say it, that we don't bank with ourselves. And, all of us have been guilty. My hand's up first. I'll raise it. But the point I'm trying to make is that there is a consciousness now that is not any different than what we saw in the 60s, that if we are going to save ourselves, we got to save ourselves. And the way to do that is one of the things you just talked about, is raising your hand, asking corporations, are you demonstrating the inclusion I heard you say at the mic? Show me when you go back to your office, are you being inclusive? You're saying inclusive, and you have me buying your shoes, but the reality is when I look and see where your money is, it doesn't directly impact communities I care about. And that is the question I think we have to start asking. It's an open letter that I put, in fact, it's on our website. I wrote last week regarding the whole George Floyd situation, which is we got some people problems, but we got some business problems. And some of the ways to solve it is to demonstrate that we are inclusive, as you and I just talked about.
I think the shared in the text, we had someone saying, I think Black banks aren't on every corner like others. We don't see them.
That's a true statement. And part of that truth has been our inability to raise capital. I'll be very transparent. Part of it has been our inability to be as relevant. We have been surviving, not thriving. And we got to fix that. And as a CEO, one of the things I am focused on daily is how do we unleash our capital and our potential to be able to reach your audience, to be able to reach the audience of TD Jakes and others, such that they know the power of our institutions. The reality is we can fix the ability to not be on every corner. Again, I'm not trying to get all of your dollars. I need some of your dollars so we can be impactful. But like what we've done in our market, to give you an example, we have basically 3 offices. So it's not big relative to Metro Detroit, but we've created partnerships with the largest banks, Fifth Third, TCF, and Chemical Bank, such that any of our customers can go to their ATMs and get their money out for free. So my point is, we are synthetically looking at how do we enlarge our footprint in a digital world, as opposed to trying to build brick and mortar, because that is actually going out of style in this day and age as it relates to banking.
I think the question, and obviously we want to have figure out how both of us create something so there's some awareness on our website. I'm committed. Give you a whole line of credit for all the ads you need. I'm just saying we can collaborate and figure that out. I think that it's the other partnerships. It is also the Visa partnership. I think it's the processors. I think you and I should talk to Elevon so that we can actually get a financial literacy program. And part of us being woke is people being able to wake up and bank with you today.
Right.
And most people don't understand how that is. So we probably want to make a video with someone actually doing it and having them go through the process to let them know that it is simple. To me, that's a big issue.
Yeah, I think so. And that's something we can commit to doing. And I love working on a project like that with you. But the thing that you're bringing up that I don't know if the listening audience really appreciates is the way we spend money, and who makes money in that value chain is more than just the store. So to what you just talked about, processing fees, et cetera, when you go into a Walmart or any store and you pay whatever you pay, they don't get all of that money that you pay. They basically have to pay some for processing fees, and there are intermediaries kind of behind the scene that is making money. And what Monson is talking about is, how do we get in that value chain and have them direct some of those dollars back to causes that are important to us? And so out of a let's just say $100 that's spent on a Visa card, there's probably a 2% runoff on that is being diverted to other people behind the scenes that you never ever see. And Monson is basically saying, I just need 50 basis points, which is the equivalent of basically say 0.5% of that, because I know now that it will come back to the community and serve us in our community. And that is part of the knowledge base that I think you're wanting to bring to the everyday listening audience, to be sure that we understand how the money is working and how we can begin to participate in that value chain of the money flow, and that money flow impacts us, not others.
True. Because I think it's important that where we spend our dollars, that we become receipt shareholders. Like at the end of the day, if we're not going to be receipt shareholders, you really are abusing me. And I came up with a new term yesterday. Obviously, it's new to me. It's called financial malpractice. And I think the Federal Reserve, I think all of those, the Treasury has had a bit of financial malpractice as it relates to serving the taxpayers of African Americans, not seeing our loss, but normalizing that malpractice, that lack of financial education, that lack of having the responsibility. Once fintech came out, PayPal doesn't have to invest back into our community, doesn't really have to say the same obligations and responsibilities, and yet it usurps the system and totally takes our community to believe that they're banking when it's just a fintech company that's siphoning off their dollars.
Right. That's exactly right. And that's the level of education I think we need to talk more about and figure out how to shape and change policies that could be impactful to us. But, the reality is, like, and I'll just go back to even my family. We only did what we knew how to do, right? And so when you had low income, low resources, you're trying to make ends meet. You're trying to survive. You're not in position to thrive and think about the horizon because your immediacy need is on today and getting food on the table today. And so if that means charging food at the little grocery store in your neighborhood and paying them off when you get paid, that's just the way you operate because it's just the survival mode you're in. But all of those things are functions of being in a society where, to your point, you use the term malpractice, where income equity makes a difference, right? And so if I don't have the same level of income, I'm having to run harder, I'm having to do things differently, I'm having to cut corners or deal with payday lenders to try to make these ends meet that just don't meet, and dig a hole for myself and my family in a lot of cases. And so those things contribute to families breaking up because money is one of the root causes of families kind of breaking up. And so we have to have more of those discussions, Munson, to be sure our audience understand how all of those things play into the outcomes that we have that we don't desire.
Quite a few people are asking questions about how we actually, what should we be saying to politicians to ensure that Treasury is working with Black banks. In addition, they're talking about, based on the Fed holding right now 0 to 0.25 between 21 and 2023, the rate, we all should support and bank with each other. What are your thoughts on how the Treasury can do more?
Well, we're having conversations with the secretary actually about once a week. I've got a call with him later today. We are trying to figure out how we can, remove some of the barriers. They've been positioned to try to change some things, just not in a systemic way, to be very candid with you. We've got to continue to raise our voices. I think we've got to advocate to Congress. So you're a congressman or a senator, we need to be advocating to them the importance of what's going on in your community and how it can impact you. And for many of us, we don't know what that answer is too, right? So what we've got to do is do a better job from the banking sector of talking about the needs for our communities such that the constituency is informed to be able to inform our banks. So for instance, one of the things we are working on right now, there's an MDI bill that passed under the leadership of Congresswoman Maxine Waters back in December. The intent is it will put more dollars into some of our banks. The intent is also to give us an opportunity to hold federal deposits, because right now we can do it, but it costs us capital to do it, so it's not beneficial. We're trying to level some of that playing field so that we can hold some of those dollars and be positioned to lend on some of those dollars into our community. So my point is something as simple as calling your congressperson and saying, I'm in support of the Minority Depository Institutions Bill, letting them know that, giving them a chance to really fortify the voice that they will have to be sure that as they go forward with the next stimulus package, that might be a bill that is under consideration. So the advocacy piece is one that's part of it. But the bottom line to you, Munson, your question back to Treasury, there is a lot they can do. There is we don't know the full outcome of what's happened with the fall in rates at the Federal Reserve. Right now, I can tell you it's negative to us because we're an asset sensitive bank, meaning we were positioned that rates, if they were gone up, we were going to do better. But because they went down, we are doing worse. That's just the nature of the beast. And so, talking about these issues and being sure that that's not understood just at a macro level, but also a micro level is something that we need to do more of.
Well, now I'm more concerned, in addition, given this movement that we're in right now, that we allow our community to understand that Black Lives Matters needs to open an account with you if they haven't. We can't allow people to say, oh, I gave this company, Black Lives Matters group, a lot of money if they're not going to bank with Black. So I'm not sure that you've been in touch, but I think all of us need to celebrate. How do we work with, if Roger Goodell literally said, I apologize, if NASCAR said they apologize, then we want NASCAR to open up a bank account with First Independence today. And so for you and I think the conversation and the ask are about literally funding that and funding co-marketing collaborations that allow people to work together. We shouldn't be excited about Apple and Apple products if they're not banking with us. We shouldn't be excited about Target if Target CEO hasn't met with you and figured out a methodology on how he could support your bank. Is that something that I'm saying correctly?
Yes, you are. You are. What we as a people have been, I would say, I won't say derelict on, but it's probably one of those we didn't know because we didn't know, is how to really create a true agenda that demonstrates inclusion. And everything you said demonstrates that. Don't just tell me you like me. Show me you love me by demonstrating the action behind it, not the rhetoric in front of it. And so what you just said is, you told me you like me, but I don't see any benefits associated with that because your practices are the same. Show me you love me by demonstrating you're willing to invest in me and willing to deposit monies with me that can help me strengthen in a capitalistic society my economic wherewithal to do the things that I know impact my community more. So that's all you said. And I don't think that is off target at all. In fact, I believe it will be welcome. Now, what is important, I think, in the conversation right now is we do see a groundswell of CEOs who are willing to come to the table and talk on this topic right now. Many of them have made statements. Many of them have made financial commitments. But we got to be sure it's not episodic. It needs to be systemic. And so to your point, which is if I do business with you that is recurring, that is systemic. If I give you a donation to a fund and say, go and participate in a legal defense fund for African Americans who have been mistreated by police, that's episodic. And it means that you have been given a fish sandwich, you haven't been taught how to fish. And what I would like to see us do is figure out either you're gonna teach me how to fish or let's get on a boat together and go out and fish. That becomes recurring and systemic. And that is the essence of the conversation we should be having.
Well, I wanted to encourage the conversation and the invitation because I guess our ask, at least after we piece this together, I think of all the initiatives, NBA, NFL, those two right there, doing business with Black banks, having a meeting with those commissioners, those owners, those franchise owners, to figure out how they bank in our community with our institutions. I think that's a social post. I think that's a real commitment. I don't believe your apology, NASCAR, unless you're doing something. Rid the flag, but they've rid the hoods. They're not wearing the hoods outside, but we still know that they have the same policies, the same economic policies toward us. So I think writing that out in a way to create that plus a housing fund will be part of what I would like to see. But how could you work with them? And is that something that you're willing to do to meet and request to meet with those individual commissioners who are over that entire league and get access, obviously, to player participation? Because there's no need to say you have a knee and for us to continue to advocate for anybody in a movement if they won't move toward Black economics. And that means having a Black bank account. We've got to have that to know. Or do you have one? Or you're not part of the movement? Because they're not making more in a CD. I think you match anybody's CD. You've literally said how you're creating a synthetic relationship. So we need to ask Jamie Dimon to literally have a conversation with you immediately so that we know that it's an honest fireside chat between rolling out you, so that now you don't have to ask me if I can get you in Chemical, U.S. Bank, Wells, and Chase. I don't think after that we can go anywhere, right?
Right.
Did I leave anybody else? That's top three, right?
That you got it, man. You do your homework. I'm so proud and impressed by you. I don't mean that blowing smoke, but I'm saying that because what you are demonstrating is something we all need to repeat, which is, if you are sitting on that side of the screen, you are taking the time to understand the issue and to report it from a position of authority. And that's why I want to congratulate you on this, because I want the listening audience to not just come and say, wow, they were smart, they talk about a lot of stuff. I want people to appreciate that you have done the homework. You call names, and I have had a conversation with Jamie Dimon, and we know the folks at Wells and a few others. And I'll give Wells credit. I can announce this because it's public. They're going to do $50 million in equity into the African-American banks, or up to $50 million in equity. We've got to put together some plans, and we'll hopefully get that rolled out. But I'm just using that as one example. So the point is, you are absolutely spot on, and that I will make myself available either as chairman of First Independence Bank or even as chairman of the National Bankers Association, which is all our minority banks, to advocate for these types of discussions, because it gets to the realness of the change that Dr. King was marching for 50 plus years ago, when he said he went from civil rights to silver rights. And about that time, he was assassinated. But the point I'm trying to make is, we never finished that discussion in a meaningful way. I am hopeful, unfortunately, due to George Floyd's death, that now there will be some realness to this that, again, is not episodic, but it's systemic going forward.
Well, there are a couple of questions. Anytime you feel like checking on the chat, I think that Monique has a question in there, and I don't know if it's best that I can give you an idea of what she's saying. We're always looking to others. We have enough buying power to do it ourselves. We don't need corporations to open bank accounts, Black bank accounts. We need Oprah, the Obamas, and all the celebrities to lead their way to opening accounts, followed by Black CEOs, Black doctors, Black lawyers, Black anybody professional who doesn't have at least one Black bank account, Black bank accounts for Black babies, Black bank accounts for Black businesses, the BB. I think that was a question or a statement.
Well, I would tell you, Monique, you are spot on. And I'm going to share this conversation without it being too close, but I sat in the office of someone extremely influential in Washington who does not look like me. And we were talking about the plight of minority banks. And in very candidness, they said, we've looked at it, we've studied it. They said, what we found is that Asian banks do well, Hispanic banks so, and African-American banks not so well. And the reason for that is Asians support Asian banks, Hispanics somewhat support Hispanic banks, but wealthy African-Americans put their money in Chase. And that was basically the quotation, without disclosing the individual. And the point I'm trying to make is, this is not something that is observed in our community. It's something that is observed broadly. And so there's some truth to what Monique has stated. Again, another studied and wise individual in this conversation. So Monique, you are spot on in that regard.
I think the conversation, though, is posting with purpose and literally making the challenge. Like, you are not with us if you don't. I think that's an uncomfortability obligation that we need to have to each other. So I'm apologizing for not having a Black. I used to bank with Citizens Trust, so I'm going to work the bank with First Independence. But and I say that because we all need to say it out loud and apologize to ourselves and to you, individuals who lead. I think we If this isn't a moment of transformation for you, you're gonna miss your moment.
That's right.
Right? Like I think the question isn't, Monique, about Oprah, is how many times will you post out loud that Oprah doesn't have a black bank or doesn't know CEO Kelly? Because if she wants to bank with a woman, I think he doesn't mind if she goes to another member and picks United, whatever. I don't think he feels a loss if it stays in the community versus outside of the community.
Right.
You know, it's a female thing. Okay, cool. Substance together. I think we're all we know how to win together. We ain't trying to lose together. That's the point.
That's right.
How do we win together? I think you're gonna have to name names. I think that's just part of the movement. You know, I think there's people want to know how to find you, so we've got to have that movement. I would like for you and I to meet with the CEO of Elevon. I think we've got to move people. They have another product. I think it's an opportunity for us to talk to young entrepreneurs. I think this is a great moment to go back to financial literacy in a much more meaningful, regular classroom, leverage way like we are today. Obviously, we have a group, and I think that there should be people paying for that. How do we go to Goldman Sachs and those huge Morgan Stanley, have a meeting and get them to support you all as well?
It's as simple as what you said. Call them up, say we want to have a meeting. And if it, that's not acceptable, there's always the other way, which is buy a share of stock.
Right.
Right. And then you got a voice to really lean into having that conversation. So that's also another way of, I would say engaging our authority, which is being sure that we have a clear path to have those discussions. And I think those who are reasonable will have reasonable discussions on these topics. But now is a great time to start having some of these discussions.
Well, for some, they need to know how to find all the black banks. So we need to share with them where they can go to find your association. I know someone shared it earlier, but could you share with us so that people can no longer say they don't know how to find and open a black bank in their area or just where the entire organization is?
Certainly. So for the National Bankers Association, which I am the chairman of, we've been in business since 1927, 93 years. Can you imagine what life was like in 1927? Thank you. For the group that started this organization. And so I was very proud to be able to take on the leadership role and hopefully help move the torch. Our banks are actually all listed on the National Bankers website. It's www.nationalbankers.org. We do have some members that are not Black. We have a Hispanic bank, we have Asian bank, and a Native American bank on there. But I think when you see the geography of the banks and where they are, it'll be very easy to decipher which banks may be African American. We basically cover the coast from Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., the Durham, North Carolina, Columbia, South Carolina, Atlanta, Georgia, down in Miami. We're in Detroit, Michigan, one in Chicago, Nashville, Tennessee, Memphis, Tennessee, New Orleans, Louisiana, and then you really kind of jump across the Mississippi River, so to speak, all the way out to the California area for most of our banks. But that, in a nutshell, sums up the geography that we cover.
So the ask is of Facebook. The ask is of Apple. The collaboration between Silicon Valley and venture capitalists.
Yes.
To make deposits in our black banks. Is that right?
That's right. That's spot on. And they had it by the not millions, but by the billions. Facebook, who all of us probably participate in, and to talk about the economics here, because this is the details that we don't think about every day. I think, and I don't remember the exact number on their balance sheet, but in cash alone, they have multiple billions of dollars in cash. And a lot of that has been made off of us who use Facebook, who turn around and sell that data to other individuals. that go into the advertising of the Coke we buy that helps contribute to that. The washing machine, the car companies, excuse me, et cetera. The point I'm trying to make is we have been monetized in ways that we don't fully understand. And so we shouldn't be ashamed of asking for, that opportunity. And I think maybe it was Monique saying, asking for others to help us. No, we're just in some cases asking for a little bit of the participation where we already have given our labor and or our data that they have monetized. So it is not inappropriate to seek to participate in that economic value chain with those companies is the point I'm trying to make.
Well, I think it goes back to something I say all the time when we're having discussions, that they made a generation ashamed to ask for participation in every cent that passes through our economy. They made us ashamed to ask those individuals for fair and equity in every company that we help to build, or any company that makes a dime off of our community.
Right.
They didn't call them baron robbers for nothing. And we don't want to be robbed or feel robbed. And this is the moment to understand you are a data shareholder in any company that shares your data. You are a receipt shareholder in any company that you give your money to and they give you a receipt. That's both digital and paper. For many, they pay their bills electronically. For everybody that you pay every month, you should have a true understanding that they are transparent about their reinvestment into our community. That's every utility, that is every grocery chain, that is every clothing store, that is every airline, that is every hotel, and they all should have a financial relationship with a Black institution. We're going to Wesley's question: should Black banks lobby Congress for the right to serve legal cannabis industry?
I'm sorry, say it again now.
He wants to know, should you be lobbying Congress to be the banks for the cannabis industry?
Well, that's a great question. We have not taken that position to do that at this point in time. As you know, cannabis has a lot of challenges with it. It now it's federally illegal, even though many states have passed these different versions, whether it's CDM, and I don't know all the terms off the top of my head here, but we have not been engaging in that space just because it's one of those that, back to this whole justice system, criminology follows a path that sometimes relates to race. And so we have not engaged in that for that reason, and also for some moral reasons at this point in time. We know that cannabis impacts our community, and I say cannabis meaning that I'm not a user, so I don't know the details between it and any other drugs, but we know that drug dependency has been one of those things that have been applied to our community to its detriment. Now, unfortunately, I know your counter would be that, well, someone else is going to make the money off of it so that they can benefit their community. Well, that's a question that's a bridge a little bit too far for us at this point in time, is the way that I would describe it.
I think there's some new interest in having equity in our community by venture capitalists controlling yet more Black GDP. Can you emphasize the importance of independence in our own newly funded organizations, thus the need for Black bank investment in hero capitalists?
Yeah, I will tell you again, this goes to financial literacy, and it's a tough question. There is a reason the big banks are big banks, and it's because of the infrastructure that they have in place to capitalize on moving dollars in a big way, in a very systemic, non-chaotic way. And what that does then is it makes it very harder for smaller entities to participate in that. So for instance, let's just say if you were, to your point of venture capital, they raise money by the hundreds of millions of dollars. that's been very challenging for small banks like ours to participate in. But the reality is we need to have more participation in that space because those dollars are being raised, they're being consolidated as capital. They create engines over here, and then they siphon dollars from over there. It's what they end up doing. So what we've got to do is figure out how do we create some of these economic engines that could exist over there such that when they siphon from over there, they also replenish money over there. The best way I can describe it is money is a lot like oxygen. And the metaphor I typically use is you can see money by traveling through the neighborhood. You can see the green grass in the yards, the pretty flowers, etc. So you know that that there is money that is there. What we've got to do is figure out how to get some of that oxygen and money into parts of the community that look like us, such that we can have green grass in the part of town that we care about too. And so there is a need for more venture capital there. There is a need for, I would say, coagulating more money in those parts of town so that they can become self-sustaining.
So I think we have a few questions. I need Martin to send his question back. Obviously, that venture question was from Terry Brantley, a developer who has that obviously interest in keeping our community solid and Black as possible economically. But when you think about companies like Twitter, Jack Dorsey's been involved. Have we met with him yet?
I have not met Jack Dorsey. Jack also, and let me just stop there because I'm under a confidentiality agreement, and so let me just stop there.
Okay. So
ask me about someone else.
Jim Cook at Apple. Have we met with him?
I have not, and I'm going to have the opportunity, I think, to engage with him. I'm actually the oncoming, or I'm actually now the chairman of the Engineering Alumni Council of Auburn University. And Tim is a member of that group. It is a small group of I will call them business leaders, executives, who are members of that group. So I'm sure we'll get a chance to meet at some point in time.
So Tidal's a reoccurring income platform, Spotify, Pandora, Tidal. How do we work it so that with Tidal, Rock Nation, to get them to bank with Black banks? Is that a meeting that we should ask for?
I think it's a meeting we should ask for. And, you know, you have a platform now that can really penetrate in a way that is beyond just, oh, the banker just called me from over there. And so you know how big companies work. I worked in a large one. So you get to go meet and talk to that person and say, yeah, it's a great idea, but I need you to meet with such and such. And it's a year later and nothing has happened. Right. You have a platform now. We have an issue platform right now that I believe that accountability is key, and asking for those conversations and holding them accountable is something that companies do not want to be seen as participating in this environment. But I do believe that the window is going to be short on this, to be very candid, because the attention span in America is about as long as a tweet. And I don't mean that negatively. It just means it moves on. I mean, the point is 2 months ago, COVID was like everybody was in the house locked down. COVID hasn't changed, but we've changed to it. Our numbness has changed to it. You know, you looking and seeing people on beaches and doing all kinds of activities that 2 months ago would have looked like a death penalty. But the point I'm making is that the attention span is not very long. And so if we're going to strike, I think we got to strike in a very short period of time.
I guess the question for many is, how will the Black bank make long-term investments in the Black community?
And that's one of the things you heard my metaphor of surviving to thriving, and we found ourselves in the surviving mode more often than the thriving mode. But I think we've got to develop some comprehensive plans that really look at maybe business as usual, but looking at dealing with some of the, I would call it, entry-level banking needs. So when you go to a bank, you typically have to have an amount of assets or some form of down payment if you're trying to get a mortgage. Well, there are businesses out there that does not have assets right now. And so they're kind of at that entry level. And we've got to figure out ways to be able to be of service to them, whether it's $5,000 or $10,000, that gets us beyond the regulations, but also make a difference in the community. And so those are plans we are putting on the table right now and things we need to look at executing on.
Well, I want to leave. We've only got a few more minutes at this lunch and hopefully appreciate the time. We'll do it again. But I think the question, well, no, the question is a little bit kind of loaded. Because if you want us to make $1 billion investment, we got to have $1 billion to invest.
Right.
And it's like, if I had $1 billion in deposits, then I got to deploy it. If we don't have our trillion from our own community in our banks, they don't even pass through our banks, then we literally there. If you don't have a black credit card from a black, right? If we can't process through an Elevon in particular, we don't have that. I just want the community to know when you ask somebody black, why don't you? It's because typically I don't have any extra. You know, it's one thing to just make very futuristic 10-year bet, spend 10 billion, figure out in 10 years or maybe in year 8 if we're close to that, slow my burn. They talk about burning. I don't think black banks have had any ability to burn any capital lately. You had any burn capital lately? You burn any capital?
I don't have any to burn, to be honest with you. And you're spot on. But to your point, I think you're asking the question, what's the outcome of this? I think the outcome of, if we're successful having these conversations with Twitter or any of the other companies you
Elevon
and Apple, you know, the outcome should be that we are positioned to do more lending in the community. So that's hopefully will be that metric we talked about early on of home ownership. We ought to see it going up. We should be positioned to talk about and to host more seminars, whether it's on this platform or in-person platform of here's what you need to do to get yourself ready to get your credit score up from a 640 to a 680 so you can buy that house, because that house is your wealth for your family going forward. We'll be positioned to talk about, yes, you need to have a will in place, because guess what? A lot of our wealth ends up where? In probate, which means what? Attorneys get most of what you worked all your life for, and they leave your family the crumbs after they kind of vultured off much of it through the probate system. So I think we can have those conversations and talk about those. And that's why when you talk about the KPIs, it's so important, such that when we do one thing, you should see an outcome that begins to associate it with it that's pretty direct.
Well, I commit to coming up with a couple of KPIs and a couple of targets so that we can both have a meeting with them and outreach so that we can at least begin. I think congressionally, we probably want to ask HUD to allow black banks to participate as developers, because that too would allow us to position ourselves to be co-developers. And I say we, black banks, black people, as
Right.
co-developers in things that we know will get government backed.
Right.
Less risk, be able to sell it on the secondary market and still create opportunities of community development and home development. But we clearly, while we have Ms. Waters there, need to create a co-development black community between Treasury and HUD right now, so that we can have those co-developments, particularly in those areas that need development, or where we know 2 to 5 years from now, a family could end up with equity. The last thing is a program called Black Entrepreneur Black Box, which is the program that we hope to announce with the black bankers, where if you open a franchise and are partners with other franchises, that you run it and there's a black box. No money comes out until all of the individual bills have been paid, and then money comes back out and is distributed from the black box. I think those are the methodologies for both housing acquisition, your redevelopment for flipping. There are white companies that already do flips. They'll give you if you qualify for flipping. I just think we need a basic black box, black bank, entrepreneurial home ownership for developers who are flippers and for those individuals who want to be in businesses that have a track record, but also have sponsors like franchises.
Right. I think you're spot on. That is something that needs to be done. And, if there are ways we can work together to try to create systems and processes to make that easier for people, because a lot of times, from an infrastructure perspective, we are trying to figure it out as we try to do it. And that's expensive. And so we do need to put together systems and processes in place to make it easier so that people can do what they do best and not have to worry about the totality of it, which sometimes bogs us down.
Yeah. Got 2 minutes. What is the CEO 2-minute elevators pitch for your organization? And obviously, congratulations on 50 years for First Independence.
Well, thank you so much. I will tell you on behalf of the Davis family and on behalf of the employees of First Independence Bank and really the citizens and the city of Detroit, allowing us to really continue to service the community for 50 years is an honor. There are not a lot of African-American entities who get to stay around this long. And so it's that support that feeds into our cycle of life and put us in the position that we'll be in. Again, I will end by saying my same old adage. I don't need all of your money. I just need some of it so that we can continue the good work of making a difference in the communities that we care about and that we serve.
That means bank black, open an account today. We're going to post our video from someone who will at least do that. It's an honor and a privilege, CEO Kenneth Kelly, to have you on the Rolling Out Business Exchange. I mean, it's true. I do want us to figure out how we get a collaboration that will allow us to go out to some of these entities, some which you may not have the time. But I think if we collaborate together, then they can't say, oh, well, it's just for one benefit. No, black media is the same way as black banks.
Right.
Literally, and I'm going to tell you this story. Disney wrote off $500 million on Vice Media.
Right.
So how much should I ask them for since they haven't invested any in me? They wrote off $500 million.
Right.
So how much should I ask Disney for, just given that they written off 500 on another media company like it was nothing?
That's a rhetorical question, or you want to know the number?
I need to know the number. So when we actually send the letter to the CEO, since he's written off 500 million, what he should invest. And I'm really just asking my brother, I'm saying we probably also should ask Congress for that 3% of all deals that go bad, that they didn't invest in us, that we should get something.
Well, right. And that's the way to, I think, approach that. It's funny you say that because I'm talking to someone else about exactly what you just said. Our number was 2, it wasn't 3. And so the point I'm making is that we can't be ashamed to ask for the ability to participate in the economic system. Because the reality is you're not standing there asking for a handout, a one-time episodic. You're asking for the opportunity to participate in the economic engine in this country. And that's very different. I want to repeat that because someone did make response earlier about, kind of asking others for. We're just asking to get in the game. Put me in the game, coach, because that's what it is. And so, to your point, the write-off of whatever, 500 million, you're nowhere near wanting to ask for that amount, but an investment in you could be the equivalent of you becoming the next John Johnson from, Johnson Publishing Company. And that's where you're trying to go and have that kind of influence across corporate America. So I see that happening. I think we can figure out what the number is because you need to do that with a basis so that people don't throw you out and say, oh, there you go again. And they're, throw you out. You want to do it from a basis that say, this can take me from X to Y such that they can say, okay, that's a safe bet. I think I want to do that. So I'll be more than happy to help look at that and figure out what it is, but there should be a number.
Super. Well, we thank you for tuning in to the Business Exchange. I'm Munson Steed. This has been CEO Kenneth Kelly, First Independence, 50 years. He is chairman of the Black Bank. Let's open a bank account today. Bank Black, be bold, and remember one thing. You don't have to be on the street, but you do have to be on the business struggle. I'm Munson Steed for Business Exchange. Peace. Thank you.
Thanks to you, Monson. Thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to coming back.
Yes, sir.
We'll be
Thank you.
following up. Take care.